Hey everybody, welcome back. We are going to actually start Project 20 today. Probably be a 3-part series here, and then we'll continue on through this as we go. So today's project number 20 then is going to be a 3-way Y branch with one of the exit ducts or the connection points connected at a 60-degree angle. It's going to look something like this on this page here. We've got somewhat of a write-up of how to lay this out. And the next page is going to be our actual dimensions. Now this part of the project, this part here, is going to be fabrication of the left and the right cheek. It says there's 2 required, but we are going to have to make a mirror image of both of these. So let's get started here. The first thing that I did prior to firing up the camera here is I looked at my dimensions. So I've got a 4-inch dimension, an 8-inch dimension, and a 4-inch dimension, plus this additional 1/2 inch here. Found a part that was that wide, and then I took into account the height. There's a 12-inch plus an additional 1/2 on the top and the bottom, so we were looking at 13 inches high by I believe about 16.5 inches in width there. Went over to the scrap bin and I found a couple pieces that were large enough to fabricate the cheeks. 16.5 plus there on each edge by at least every bit of 13, and we got 14 on that one and 14 plus on this other one. So those 2 parts should be sufficient to handle this project. The next thing I did then is I scribed my 1/2 inch base mark to start. So using my scribe, I ran them across, and then in order to give myself a pivot point, you could do it on the edge, but it's kind of a pain in the tail there to do that. So I moved it in a 1/4 inch on each side. So I just gave myself a mark down both of these sheets at that 1/4 inch dimension. Now I've got an area there with that 1/4 inch dimension that when I get my dividers out here, it's a little bit easier to set the points versus trying to set them right on that edge and they'd be falling off and everything else. So, all right, the next thing that we're going to do then is we are going to work on establishing these points across the bottom. So there's a 4-inch mark, there's an 8-inch opening, and then there's an additional 4-inch radius to come up with this, plus the additional 1/2 inch here on top of that. So about a 4.5 inch radius realistically from the edge of the sheet. So let's start with this side first of all, and we're going to set the dividers at a 4-inch dimension, and I'm just going to use my little square here. So I'm going to open this up till it reads, set it on the 1-inch mark and 5 inches to get my 4-inch radius. The next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to strike this arc through here on the plan from the point to point there. Doesn't appear that my 1/2 inch went all the way to the end. So let's fix that. Now that I've got that in my 4-inch set, we're going to strike that arc all the way down. And if you recall, I'm making a left-hand and a right-hand part at the same time, so I'm going to do the exact same, but of the mirror image while the dividers are set. So what I do on one half, I've got to do on the other. Now that I've got my first 4-inch radius, or rather my inside mark there, all the way up and around, I've got to establish the 60-degree angle. So what we do without changing it, we take our dividers, we put it on this outer point here, and then we strike an arc through our previously marked radius. And that should come out to a 60-degree angle in the both directions there. And then with my square, slide that book up out of the way, for my pivot point right here, 1/2, and for this sheet I marked it a 1/4 inch in. We'll swing that in there until we find those crosshairs. And that should give us our 60-degree starting point up off the page there. Right here. Then we can't forget we've got to add an additional 1/2 inch onto that after a while before we make these other pivot points that direction. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deduct the 1/4 inch off of my radius there, so you can see it. Deduct that 1/4 inch so I can make that easy edge for the lock form later on there. So we're going to set it again. Take the square. What was 5 inches is now going to be, which was 4 inches, now going to be 3 3/4. So I've got to deduct the 3/4 inch marking there. We'll tighten that up. And then again, with that same pivot point on both of these. Now we've got our inside corner marked. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take into account my 8-inch opening on the base. So I'll use the red numbers here so you can see it. Alright, between those two marks I should have an 8-inch opening entering, and then from the 8-inch dimension we got to measure out another 4 inches to find our pivot point. I see these are kind of hard to spot, so I hope I got a Sharpie. I do. And I'm just going to put some marks where they are so you can see them. There's our 8 inches. From the scribe points. From that 8 inches, I'm going to go an additional 4 inches. So again, using the red number 4 there, we'll pull that out until we find the edge of the sheet. It's very difficult to spot these, so sometimes it'll help if you can't see them. You can put a little Sharpie mark on there and then just scribe right through the Sharpie to be able to see and spot that center point. And I'll do the same over here. And then the additional 4 inches from the inside mark. Another thing you can do is just take your scribe there and put a small divot where your pivot points need to be. Just make sure you don't punch through them. And these won't matter. I wouldn't want to put a divot point in a part that's exposed. But this is all going to get cut out of here anyway, a little bit. Alright, Now that I've got that left-hand side set up there, I'm going to take my dividers, which I originally had set at 4 inches, and now I've adjusted to 3 3/4, so I'm going to take that 1/4 inch into account for my inner radius first here, being they're set up. And we'll strike that arc all the way to a 90 degree. We'll do that on both, so we get our mirror images of one another. And then I'm going to extend that again back to my original 4-inch dimension on the 1 and the 5 point. And then if we take our square, we should be able to square that right directly up off the page from that pivot point. And then again, if you look at the book, we have to add on the additional 1/2 inch for that both them sections. So we're going to do that next. So I'm going to simply measure over 1/2 inch from my mark. On both of them.